guess I should have this off maybe.
Looks like it's coming up on LinkedIn.
Sweet.
Yep.
All right. Cool. Well, we will wait just. Oh. All right. Wait a couple of minutes before we get started. Well, we will wait just. Zach, can you either mute or pause the live stream on your other tab? All right. We'll wait just one more minute and then do a quick introduction. Give folks a chance to join. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello to everyone. Good morning for anyone who is in Colorado, like myself and Zach. I'm Kelsey Ellis. I'm on the product marketing team here at Gravitee. Today we are going to do a quick overview of what's new in Gravitee 4.3, and then Zach is going to show you guys a quick demo of all the things we talk about. Zach, you want to give a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Kelsey. My name is Zach Weld. I'm a solutions engineer here at Gravitee. And after Kelsey gives you the overview of our changes, we're going to dive into the actual product to take a look at some of the new features that are released in our 4.3 release.
Nice. All right, let's dive in. So agenda today, we're going to do a quick overview of Gravitee for those of you who are not already familiar. And on LinkedIn, you can kind of just jump into a live stream whenever. So we will talk about what it is that we do. I will cover the 4.3 highlights from the API management side. Like we mentioned, Zach will give a quick demo and technical discussion. And then I'll share some additional resources of the things we talk about. So release notes, launch blog, some things like that, which we will share in the comments. And then we'll open up the discussion for questions at the end. So I'm going to get through my bit, and then we can get to the fun part with Zach. So starting with quick Gravitee overview. So Gravitee is an API management platform similar to most other ones that you might already be aware of. The difference being that we really focus on being able to expose your event-driven backends. So you might hear us talk about being event native. That really just means that we have a platform mindset where the lifecycle tooling covers APIs beyond your typical REST, SOAP, and GraphQL. So in this diagram, you see that we have support for Kafka, RabbitMQ. You can expose those things as a REST API, HTTP, WebSocket, things like that. So let's get on to Gravitee 4.3. So major highlights for this release. We have updated support for event APIs, protocol mediation, and other v4 API functionality. I'll get into that briefly, like what we're talking about by v4. There's two API definitions within the platform, which Zach can cover in more detail, but I'll just give you guys quick highlights. And then we will talk about a couple of new policies that we have with this release, one being the GraphQL rate limiting, the other being Protobuf transformation policies. These are two major ones for us in this release. And then we have GUI support for TCP Proxy APIs. So the TCP Proxy was released in Gravitee 4.2. It is now in the UI. So like I mentioned, quick API definitions recap. There are two in the Gravitee platform. There's V2 and there's V4. At the end of this presentation, I can share a quick overview with you guys that dives a little bit deeper, and I'm sure that Zach will cover some of it too. But The goal here with this release and with upcoming releases will be to achieve feature parity for V2 and V4 APIs. So the V4 API definition enables you to expose those event brokers as APIs, like I mentioned in the Gravitee overview slide. It allows you to manage more APIs, and it allows you to have a single layer of APIM for all of your APIs, meaning a better developer experience for your API consumers and your API publishers. So what are we talking about when we're saying we have advanced or enhanced support for V4 APIs with this release? This means sharding tags, dynamic properties, notifications, version history, audit logs, response templates, cores, health checks, portal messages, and then improved documentation support, which Zach will also cover in more detail. Moving on to the new policies. A big thing that we hear a lot in the field is support for GraphQL rate limiting. Is the need for support, which we now have. So folks want to set up a GraphQL API and expose that endpoint to clients, but that's really only useful when you have a gateway that can enforce logic. So with this release, we now have a GraphQL rate limiting policy, which Zach will get into more detail about. We also have, like I mentioned, the Protobuf transformation policies. So these convert your message payloads between serialized formats. This is a common use case for data that is stored in Kafka as Protobuf, schema stored in the schema registry, and then data consumed by API subscribers in JSON. Again, Zach is going to show you guys in a little bit more detail what this looks like in the platform and what this means for you all. And then finally, like I mentioned, TCP Proxy support in the UI. So in 4.2, this was only available in MAPI. It is now available in the UI, as you will see very, very shortly. Before I hand it off to Zach for a demo, let me just check to make sure there aren't any questions already. All right, I don't see any. So Zach, I'm going to hand it off to you. I'll stop sharing my screen and we can share yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelsey. Yeah, so we'll hit some of the highlights that Kelsey just went over inside of our portal. So the version I've got running up here is 4.3.2. One of the big changes was some of that parity we've been talking about. So when you're creating our new APIs, we have V2 and V4. Now, if you've been working with our open source edition, you've been probably familiar with our V2, but V4 provides a lot more of our functionality around our event streaming, and still completely supports our synchronous API calls, but was missing some of our other features that the V2 had. So if you were working in something prior to 4.3, so this one's running in 4.2, and you look, we have a lot of these features that were mapped out, say they're coming soon for V4 APIs. With our 4.3 release, those are now available here. So if we dive into an HTTP proxy API, you're now going to have all those capabilities of notifications and audit logs and other properties up here. The menu does look a little bit different in 4.3, but contains all the same information, just broken down in a little bit different way than we had before. Like Kelsey mentioned, we also now have the support for adding a TCP proxy. So when creating one of your V4 APIs, if we come in here and just do a TCP proxy, the only thing that changes, you'll now see this TCP option here for your proxy protocol stream. And when you go in here, you now have the option to select this TCP proxy instead of just using a standard HTTP. And you'll come in here, select your host that you're going to run from, and then your host and backend that will integrate with this. So target, and then whatever port you need to run on. So same process as creating your proxy APIs, but just able to run that TCP protocol instead. And then you'll see here, it'll highlight that it's the TCP protocol. So on having the TCP and then having all of these other functionalities in our V4 now lets users utilize more of the functionality that has been capable inside of the V2. The next touch point I wanted to get into was that GraphQL rate limiting. So when we go into our policies in here, this HTTP is actually configured for the backend to be an HTTP or a GraphQL call. So inside of our policies now, instead of just our standard rate limiting policy for your normal API call, we also have this GraphQL rate limit. The big difference here is when we're rate limiting a standard API call, the weight of those calls is all one-to-one. So you hit the entry point once and you hit the backend service once. So when we limit, we just want to limit on the number of call volumes. But that can get a lot trickier with GraphQL because the queries can vary in their complexity. So now we're able to limit based on that complexity. So if we have a query, say we're calling from Postman and we have a query that's running like this, the weight isn't one-to-one anymore because we're running a couple loops in here to be able to grab, 10 different people here, 20 different here. The weight of this actually multiplies up to around 830 something. So it's no longer a one-to-one ratio on how much work this query is doing when you're just making, even though you're just making one API call. So we can limit the weight of these calls to, let's say, 500. I'm just putting in a number here. And how we calculate these can also be seen inside of our documentation. It's simple complexity math on how we calculate that as well. So this is a feature we've been waiting to put in, or been ready to put in, and really happy to have it out there for people because we get a lot of questions around GraphQL and what we can do to manage. Because if somebody calls an API and throws in a very heavy query, it's going to tear down the server and people have a lot of issues. So with this, we're able to mediate that issue. The next big one we want to talk about is the Protobuf policy. So if I jump out to, I have a Kafka API out here where the entry points come in through an HTTP post and the backend connects to my default Kafka server. So we talk a lot with our V2 and V4 APIs about protocol mediation when we're converting from synchronous API calls to asynchronous and converting from this HTTP post over to Kafka, publish and subscribe. But the big thing with event-driven systems is the way this data is passed. So they all want to be as throughput and utilize all of their backend services as well as possible. So it comes down to the serialization patterns that they pass the data in. So whether it's Kafka utilizing something like Avro or Protobuf for like a gRPC endpoint, all of these help with your throughput and are all utilized very commonly on the back end. They also help through the schema registries on making sure that the payload getting passed through is consistent every time. And when we're having customers using Kafka and bouncing back to HTTP posts, so receiving their messages in JSON, the data types are being serialized and unserialized back and forth. And so with our new protocols, we're able to convert from JSON to Protobuf, Protobuf to Avro, Avro to JSON, any kind of combination of those, so that no matter what your customer is trying to read and how they're trying to read that data format, we can support that. So when you come into our policy studio for an event-driven API, you'll have your standard initial connection request phase, and you're not going to see any of these Protobuf policies in here, Avro and JSON. You want to hop over to our event messages in here. So this is how you're going to change the data going in and out of Kafka. So if we come in here and we want to select something like, we'll do JSON to Protobuf. So when you select this policy, you have the option to go from JSON to Protobuf, Protobuf to JSON, and you also have the ability to utilize a schema registry. So if you already have a registry established inside of Confluent or inside of Google, depending on what kind of messaging system you're using, You can do that. If you just want to do an inline schema, you can do that as well. So if something like Protobuf could look like a basic record, could look like this, and be able to apply that policy so that from going from JSON into Kafka with a Protobuf schema, we can convert there and then apply the same thing on the back end to be able to go back from Protobuf to JSON with the same schema there. So now you can have it so that we still get to utilize these serialization methods because they're very important when it comes to throughput and maximizing the efficiency of these messages, because JSON is very wordy. It combines the schema and the values of your message, breaking it down into these serialization messages, strips out that schema registry and just passes in the messages. So this is a nice feature for us and being able to be very flexible. This Protobuf also comes in key, like I mentioned earlier, on the gRPC endpoint. So if you're utilizing that and want to stream JSON data into Protobuf, easy way to be able to utilize that here. And the last thing I wanted to cover with, getting this V4 parity that we have with V2, one of the big ones that I get asked a lot about is the documentation. And what we were able to add here, I'm in the wrong API. So if I hop back to my proxy API, we were able to add in, the open API and async API specs. So being able to add in a new page, come in here and choose from your options. So if I choose a new async API, we'll just name this async. I'm able to import from a file and grab it from here. So if I pull in the spec, automatically gives me a preview of what it's going to look like. And if I save and publish this, it's automatically going to hop out to our developer portal. So in our catalog, if I go out to the View API, go into our documentation, you're going to see that open API spec that was already there, and then our new async API spec. So that's a high level of what some of the new features are, whether it's TCP, GraphQL, Protobuf, documentation. Like I said, a lot of this is just getting that V2 functionality across through our V4 APIs to give you that full functionality and get more functionality around our event-driven systems. I'm going to pass it back over to you, Kelsey. Thanks for letting me share. And if you have any questions, please feel free to throw it into the comment section. We can answer them on here, or if we don't have time, we can also answer them offline and come back to it. So thanks.
Sweet. Thank you, Zach. Like Zach just mentioned, if you have any questions, now is the time to drop those in the chat. I will also be providing some links to additional resources for you all to dive a little bit deeper into 4.3 if you would like. So this will include the 4.3 API management release notes, the access management release notes, which we didn't cover on this live stream, but there's a lot of good details in the documentation there. I'll shoot over the documentation for the new policies that Zach just covered, and then the launch blog and a quick API definitions overview. Let me check the chat real quick. I don't see any questions coming in, but I'll show the questions slide anyway. And like Zach mentioned, if you guys think of any questions that you have after this is over, we are happy to chat with you at your earliest convenience. So I'll let us wait another minute or so to see if any questions come through. But if not, then we'll give you guys your time back. I guess we had this scheduled for 30 minutes or so really knocked it out. Very efficient. All right, Zach, you got anything else for us?
No, just, if there's any features that stand out and you want some further information, like either through questions or schedule a demo, any of those demos are going to be with myself or another another member of our solutions engineering team, so we can dive into any specific use cases that you have and kind of help troubleshoot if you're not able to get it up and running. You also have the ability to go out and get a 2-week trial license if you want to test out our SaaS environment.
Yeah, that's a good call. I'll add the links to those things too in the comments.
Cool. And just got a question around the TCP protocol. Can we use all of the policies? No, at the current moment. So if I jump out, so in our TCP, those are still coming soon for v4 APIs. This TCP protocol is like coming in phases. So in 4.2, it was available through the backend to be able to set up a TCP protocol. And now we've got it in the UI, but the policies are not 100% there yet. That's a good question. Thank you.
All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and call it a day then. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one, I guess, next quarter.
Sounds good.
Oh, and we have another live stream coming up in 2 weeks from today. That will be with Alex Drag, possibly Michael Field, or maybe you, Zach. So. All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Good. Thanks.